Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're going back in time to 2003.
Ooh, 2003, that's going way
It
back.
is. Yeah, we're cracking open Amazon's shareholder letter from that year.
Shareholder letter. So we're talking financials.
We are.
Yeah.
But stick with me on this one because this is not your typical, dry numbers report.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's more like uh, getting this, like, a glimpse into the mind of Jeff Bezos.
Before he was, the Jeff Bezos.
Exactly, yeah. Pre-world domination
Right.
and seeing these, like, seeds of Amazon success being planted.
Okay.
So we're gonna unearth his thoughts on long-term thinking, on customer obsession,
Mm-hmm.
and what it really takes to build a company that lasts, stands the test of time.
I love it.
He even throws in a really surprising Christmas tree analogy in this letter.
Okay, now I'm really interested.
I know, right? So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So what's really captivating about this letter is that it reveals this, like, DNA of
Uh-huh.
Amazon. And these aren't just, like, these sort of, like, abstract principles that he's talking about.
Yeah.
He actually put these into action, like operationalize them into real decisions.
Yay.
And a lot of these decisions were actually counterintuitive at the time.
Interesting.
So right from the get-go,
Mm-hmm.
Bezos draws this really fascinating comparison
Okay.
between short-term investors and he calls them tenants who would just nail a Christmas tree right into the hardwood floor.
Ouch, what an image.
I know, right? It's kind of brutal.
Yeah.
But what do you make of that analogy?
Well, it is powerful. I'll give him
Yeah.
that. And it really underscores Bezos's like hardcore commitment to the long game, long-term thinking.
Yeah.
He's basically saying that short-term thinking is like, causing damage for just like a quick fix.
Yeah.
Like a Band-Aid solution.
Right.
True owners, the ones that are really invested for the long haul,
Mm-hmm.
they take care of their property. They understand that, decisions made, they have ripple effects.
Absolutely.
They impact the future and they act accordingly.
Yeah, it's almost like he's saying, don't be a tenant in your own company.
Exactly. Think like an owner make decisions that, build up the foundation, make it stronger, not weaker.
Right.
And this leads us to another key principle he talks about, and that's prioritizing the customer experience
Yes.
over short-term profits.
And that's where things get really, really intriguing.
Okay.
Because Bezos talks about allowing negative product reviews
Did
on Amazon, even though he knew that it might hurt sales in the short term.
Yeah.
That's pretty counterintuitive, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Back in 2003, online shopping, it was still like gaining traction. It wasn't like,
Yeah.
As common as it is today. So
Right.
trust was everything,
Right.
paramount.
Yeah.
And by allowing these negative reviews, Amazon was basically saying to the customer, like, hey, we're transparent, we're honest,
Right.
you can rely on us, which is, it was a risky move for sure, but it built a level of trust that very few online retailers had back then.
And think about how much we rely on those reviews today. I mean, it's like second nature
Totally.
to just go straight to those star ratings
Yeah.
and, like, read through all the feedback, good and bad,
Mhm.
before you buy anything.
Yeah, it's become like our go-to source of truth almost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But Bezos, he didn't stop there.
Oh, no.
He also highlights this feature that they implemented called the Instant Order Update,
Okay.
which was designed to remind customers if they had already bought an item.
Wait, they built a feature that could potentially prevent a sale?
I know, it's kind of wild, right?
I'm very curious, like, what was the thinking behind that?
I know, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So this seemingly, tiny little detail,
Yeah.
it actually speaks volumes about how customer-centric they were.
Okay.
So they recognize that, customers could get frustrated.
Yeah.
They might accidentally buy duplicates of something.
Right.
And they just addressed it head on.
Wow.
And again, this might seem counterproductive, in the short term,
Yeah.
but in the long run, it reinforces that trust and it strengthens the customer relationship.
They're really playing the long game from the very beginning.
It seems like it, even in these little details.
Yeah.
This leads us to another really important concept in the letter, this price-cost structure loop.
Okay.
And Bezos was obsessed with this idea of just relentlessly reducing costs and then passing those savings directly on to the customer.
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Keep the customer happy.
Yeah. And this is where the concept of economies of scale really comes into play.
Okay.
So by driving efficiency and constantly optimizing, all their operations,
Mm-hmm.
they could lower prices, attract even more customers,
Yeah.
increase the volume of sales,
Right.
and then further reduce their costs per unit.
So it's like a cycle, a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. It becomes this powerful cycle that just feeds itself.
It's-
Yeah. So, like, imagine you're buying toilet paper in bulk, right?
Yeah.
The more rolls you buy, the cheaper each roll becomes.
Right.
Amazon applied that principle,
Right.
but on this massive scale.
I see. So the more customers they attract, the lower their cost per unit becomes,
Exactly.
which allows them to offer even lower prices, which attracts even more customers. Yeah,
Like this flywheel effect.
it's incredible, and it's just these really simple concepts, but then when you apply them at scale, it's like game-changing.
Fully.
So they're focused on the customer, they're driving down costs.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another piece to this sort of like financial puzzle,
Okay.
and that's free cash flow.
Right.
And this is where things might get a little technical for some listeners. So
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to break this down for us.
Yeah, sure.
Bezos emphasizes the importance of free cash flow over profitability.
Right.
Why was that so crucial for their long-term growth strategy?
Well, most companies, they really aim to maximize their profit margins, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. But Bezos, he understood that for a company like Amazon that was growing so rapidly, maximizing free cash flow was really the key to fueling all that future growth and expansion.
So instead of just pocketing the profits, they were strategically reinvesting free cash flow.
Yeah, it allowed them to make these huge investments in building infrastructure,
Right.
developing new technologies, expanding their product offerings. They even acquired companies like Zappos.
Wow.
I mean, all of these moves, they seemed really risky at the time,
Yeah.
but they were absolutely crucial to building, the dominant position that they have today.
Right.
These were investments that might have, impacted their profitability in the short term, but they were absolutely essential for long-term success.
So it's like they weren't just playing a different game. They were writing a whole new rule book.
It's really remarkable, and it's a testament to Bezos's vision and his willingness to prioritize long-term value creation over those short-term gains. And what's really interesting is that to kind of like really drive home this long-term vision, Bezos actually includes a reprint of his original 1997 shareholder letter.
Wow.
In this 2003 letter.
He reprinted it.
Yeah, like talk about commitment, right?
It's like he's saying, here's the blueprint. This is what we've believed in from day one.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what were some of the key points that really stood out to you in that 1997 letter?
Well, it's pretty remarkable how consistent Bezos's vision has been from the very beginning. I mean, a lot of the themes that we see in the 2003 letter, like customer obsession, the long-term thinking, that willingness to embrace these bold bets, they're already present in that 1997 letter.
I see.
It wasn't just lip service. He was putting these principles into action right from the start.
So it wasn't like he was adapting to the market as it was changing, but more like he was trying to shape the market.
Exactly. Yeah. He had this core set of values, and he was using that as a guide. One specific example that really struck me was his focus on hiring.
Okay.
Even back in 1997, he was stressing how important it was to attract and retain really versatile and talented employees and rewarding them with stock options, not just cash.
So he wanted to create this culture of ownership right from the get-go.
Absolutely. He envisioned a company where every employee, not just, the executives, felt invested in Amazon's long-term success.
Right. And this actually leads us to another one of those kind of like iconic concepts that's hinted at in both letters. This idea of the day one mindset.
The day one mindset.
It's become like a bit of a mantra.
It has, haven't it?
In the business world.
Yeah.
But what does it actually mean, like in practical terms?
Right. So for those who maybe aren't as familiar with this whole day one philosophy, can you kind of like unpack it for us?
Yeah.
Why is it so crucial for continued innovation, even for a company as huge as Amazon?
Well, it's all about maintaining that same hunger and agility
and customer focus that you have like literally on the first day of starting a company, and holding on to that even as you grow into this massive corporation.
Gotta be hard.
It's about resisting that temptation to become complacent, bureaucratic, internally focused.
So you're actively fighting against all those forces that tend to pull established companies towards what you might call a day two mentality.
Exactly. Day two companies, they often become much more concerned with, processes, internal politics, protecting their existing market share than they are with innovating and continuing to deliver those like exceptional customer experiences.
Like they get comfortable.
They do, and they become risk averse and they get slow moving. Bezos sees that as a death knell for any company that wants to stay ahead of the curve.
So how does a company avoid slipping into that day two trap?
Right. Well,
what are some of those specific behaviors or practices that really define a day one company?
Well, in his letters, Bezos outlines a few key elements.
Okay.
The first one is resisting complacency.
Okay.
It's really easy to rest on your laurels when you've achieved a certain level of success.
Right, of course.
But at day one company, they're constantly seeking to reinvent themselves.
Yeah.
Experiment, take calculated risks.
It's like they're perpetually operating with that startup energy,
Exactly.
even with like billions in revenue.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Another key element is an unwavering focus on the customer.
Okay.
Day two companies, they often become, too internally focused.
Yeah.
They're more concerned with their own processes, their own metrics,
Right.
than with really understanding and meeting customer needs.
So it's about staying obsessed with delivering value to the customer.
Exactly.
Even as the company, evolves and expands into all these new areas.
Yeah.
And finally, a day one company embraces that long-term perspective.
Right.
They're not afraid to make decisions that, might not pay off immediately.
Yeah.
But that will create lasting value down the road.
Mm-hmm.
They're willing to play the long game.
Exactly.
Even if it means sacrificing some short-term gains.
Yeah, you've got it.
It's fascinating how this whole day one philosophy really ties back to everything we've been talking about.
It does.
This long-term thinking customer obsession.
Yeah.
This willingness to make bold bets.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected.
Yeah. And one of the ways that Amazon really reinforces this day one mindset is through their approach to employee ownership.
Yes.
Which Bezos actually hinted at in his 1997 letter.
Right.
You mentioned earlier that he emphasized stock options as a key part of employee compensation.
I did.
How does that tie into this idea of creating that culture of ownership?
Well, by giving employees significant stock options.
Okay.
Bezos wasn't just offering them, a financial incentive.
Yeah.
He was giving them a real stake in the company's long-term success.
So instead of just, working for a paycheck, they're literally invested in the company's future.
Precisely, it aligns their individual goals with the overall success of Amazon.
I see.
So if the company thrives in the long term, their stock options become more valuable.
Right.
It's a really clever way to incentivize employees to think and act like owners, to make decisions that benefit the company as a whole, even if it means, delaying gratification or taking on more responsibility.
It's amazing how all of these seemingly separate pieces, this customer obsession,
Yeah.
the long-term, the employee ownership, the day one mindset,
It all fits together.
they all fit together into this cohesive and powerful strategy for building a company that really lasts.
It really is a testament to Bezos's vision and his ability to create a company culture that embodies all of these principles. It's not just slogans. It's about weaving these values into the very fabric of the organization.
I mean, it's really just mind-boggling to think about how much Amazon has grown since 2003.
Yeah.
I mean, they went from basically like an online bookstore to this like sprawling tech giant that has its hand in like practically every industry imaginable.
It is remarkable. And what I think is really fascinating is how these core principles we've been talking about, customer obsession, long-term thinking, operational excellence, they've remained so consistent, throughout all these changes.
It's true.
It's like those principles were like the bedrock for everything that followed.
Right. But here's the million-dollar question.
Okay.
As Amazon's grown into this massive, complex organization, have they been able to hold on to that crucial like day one energy that Bezos so passionately advocated for?
Yeah.
Or have they kind of succumbed to that inevitable, creep of day two?
Right. It's a valid question. And, it's definitely a challenge for any company that gets that big to avoid, becoming too bureaucratic, complacent.
Yeah.
But I have to say, to their credit, Amazon seems to have made a really conscious effort to combat that. They've kept this relatively decentralized structure, empowering individual teams with a lot of autonomy.
Right.
And they encourage experimentation, even at their size.
So even though there's this huge corporation, they're still trying to preserve that nimbleness and agility that we usually associate with, smaller startups.
Yeah, that definitely seems to be the goal. And they haven't been afraid to just dive headfirst into these like totally new, innovative areas. And look at their cloud computing platform, AWS. AWS, yeah, which was really just getting started around the time of this 2003 letter.
It's funny to think that back in 2003, cloud computing was this like niche concept.
I know.
And now it's like AWS is this behemoth
It is.
that powers, a huge chunk of the internet.
Yeah. You're right. It really is a testament to their willingness to think big, to embrace new opportunities, and
Yeah.
just not be afraid to push those boundaries.
Yeah.
Even if those new ventures seem completely unrelated to their core business at the time.
That's true. So as we wrap up our deep dive into this really fascinating piece of Amazon's history, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What can we glean from Bezos's 2003 shareholder letter all these years later?
I think the big takeaway here is the power of having a clear long-term vision and the courage to stick to your principles even when they might seem counterintuitive or, go against the grain of conventional wisdom. Amazon's success wasn't built on like overnight profits or chasing, whatever the hot new trend was.
Right.
It was built on this deep understanding of what customers really need.
Yeah.
A relentless pursuit of innovation and this willingness to invest patiently for the long haul.
And maybe just a little bit of that day one magic, too.
Oh, absolutely. A little sprinkle of that day one magic goes a long way.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that no matter where you're at, whether you're just starting out or you're leading this huge organization, having that sense of urgency, that hunger to learn and adapt and grow, that can really make all the difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well said. All right, folks, that's going to do it for this deep dive into the mind of Jeff Bezos circa 2003.
It was a good one.
It was fun. If you're interested in reading the full shareholder letter yourself, you can find a link in the show notes.
You should.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
See you next time.